Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee on Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. We'll now call the meeting to order. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Dalronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay. So I need a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda. Member Riley? And Member Nixon? Resolved that the March 14th, 2023 Heritage Grimsby Advisory Meeting agenda be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. Next on our list, we have the adoption of previous minutes. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Nixon? And seconded by Member Evans. All in favor? Oh. Okay. Resolved that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee minutes of February 2nd, 2023 be approved. Okay, next on our list are verbal updates. 6.1 Main Street East Heritage Conservation District. Bianca?
Thank you, through you, the chair. I just quickly wanted to take a moment and introduce Jojo from our team. She's going to be presenting here tonight. So Jojo is our heritage intern. Jojo has been working with Garrett and I for just over 6 months now, and she's been behind the scenes doing a lot of the research for the heritage sites you guys have been seeing coming to the meetings, and she's been heavily involved in those designation reports. Joanna comes from Willowbank, Canada's premier heritage conservation school. Before coming to Grimsby and doing her internship with us, she worked with extensive property research, window restoration, and masonry restoration, in addition to completing her studies at Willowbank. So we're very fortunate to have her on our team. So now I'll go into the Heritage Conservation District. So our Heritage Conservation District is along the Main Street East corridor, and I wanted to let you know that the study has now resumed following the impacts of Bill 23, and our project team at Stantec are now well underway with the work to amend the report and further assess the area against the new criteria, which has been introduced through Ontario Regulation 56922. So that's my update if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions? Can I have a mover and a seconder to accept the report? Resolved that the verbal updated regarding Main Street East Heritage Conservation District be received. All in favor? That's moved. And number 7, memorandum. Okay. And we're going now into reports. So our first report, 8-1 GH23-03, recommendation report, heritage permit, 262 Main Street West. Bianca?
Through you, the chair, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so we received a heritage permit application for the property at 262 Main Street West. So for this property, council previously approved a subdivision on the site. So the purpose of this heritage permit was for technical approval to register the subdivision, and then following the registration of the subdivision, we can amend the designation bylaw. So just for some background information, designation bylaws have a legal description. So when they register the subdivision, that land will then be severed from the original heritage parcel. So we won't have a technical legal description until after the severance takes place. So once that takes place, then we can amend the bylaw. And our staff recommendation is when we amend that bylaw, we update the statement of significance, and then we add detailed list of character defining elements, and that'll help us to continue to guide change on that site in the future. So it's very technical in nature. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Member Nixon?
Thank you. Through you, the chair. I was looking at the previous agenda or the previous meetings where we talked about this building. And so just for clarification, when we are updating the designation, I know the last time this came through to us, we were interested in protecting like the butternut tree that was on the property, as well as there was some conversations around the fence. I know that was some issues. So will these then be addressed in the updated designation?
Bianca?
Thank you, through you, the chair. So the fence, the recommendation we ended up putting forward from Heritage Committee was that it be to the left to the discretion of the property owner to update in the future if they choose. It's a very significant restoration project that's being done on the site, and so that was something the committee had agreed to, was that they could deal with the fence down the road, and that was the height of the fence. But we did have a lot of recommendations associated with this site, and those will go through the subdivision agreement. So all those recommendations will be in there, and that will look at, we wanted some vegetative screening and have like the Carolinian forest be reintegrated there with some of the plantings, hoarding for the tree, that kind of stuff. That'll all be in the agreement, and they have to do all those things. And then when we actually update the designation bylaw, we can be very detailed on those character defining elements. So if you wanted the tree to be noted, we could do that within the attributes. But we would look at things like the windows and things like that. It's very detailed. But right now it's just anything visible from the public realm is best practice, but we want to be really specific. Yeah.
Okay, do I have a mover and a seconder to accept the report? Resolved that the report Heritage Permit Application 262 Main Street West, technical approval to accommodate for registration of plan of subdivision notwithstanding legal description be received, and that the committee recommends that the heritage permit be approved, and that following the registration of the approved subdivision, that the designation bylaw be amended with the appropriate legal description reflecting the remnant heritage lot, and that the designation bylaw be amended to include an updated statement of significance, and that the designation bylaw be amended to include a list of character defining elements. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. And next on the agenda, we have 8.2, GH 23-04, Municipal Heritage Register, demolition request, 487 Main Street West. Bianca?
Thank you, through you, the chair. So on February 2nd, 2023, a demolition permit was submitted for the property at 487 Main Street West. Staff note that February 2nd will be moving forward as the formal date the provisions under the Heritage Act commenced. So once a demolition permit for a building on the register is applied for, staff have 60 days to provide a recommendation to council and provide the applicant with a decision. It is important to note that the last Heritage Committee meeting took place on February 2nd, and due to the submission of the demolition permit being on the same date as the meeting, this matter was prioritized for tonight's Heritage Committee meeting. However, in order to meet the statutory timelines of the Ontario Heritage Act and provide an opportunity for consultation with the Heritage Committee, staff will need to streamline the approval process by going directly to council on March 20th rather than waiting for the Committee of the Whole decision to be ratified on April 3rd. This will enable the municipality to meet the 60-day timelines mandated by the province and ensure consultation with the Heritage Committee. So following our extensive review of the property, we concluded that the property did not meet any of the criteria as prescribed by the ministry through Ontario Regulation 56922. And therefore, the property did not merit long-term protection under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, also known as designation. And it is important to note that no contextual or associative value was identified on the subject site. So now, following receipt of this demolition permit, council must firstly identify if any cultural heritage value was identified on the site, and then if there is, to proceed with designation, and then if there isn't, to have the property removed from the register and allow the building to be demolished. So again, in summary, based on our assessment, the property did not meet any of the criteria and thus did not merit designation, and it is being recommended that it be removed from the register and that the demolition request be permitted. Thank you.
You'll have to set up screen sharing to show the council chambers.
Thank you, Bianca. Any questions? Member Evans?
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to know, are there concerns that there's any other homes like this that have been added to the registry that maybe haven't had thorough investigation, where they could be coming forward and they could be in a state like this? And also, if it was deemed to have heritage value, what would the process be for this homeowner? Because it's already in quite a state where repair, there would be extensive work required. One of the pictures looks like the ceiling could be bowing, which suggests there's a possibility of the ceiling totally caving in. So I'm just wondering, from the perspective of, if it was deemed to be heritage worthy, what would the process be for the homeowner?
Bianca?
Thank you, through the chair. So firstly, this is the whole purpose of the register, is if a demolition comes through, we're able to check and make sure there's nothing of significance, and then we can move forward if there isn't. So this is a perfect example of when you would want to have a list like this so you can double check. This property in particular was added because of its placement along Main Street West and the potential to have further understanding of the development of that corridor. So that's why it was initially added. But if it was in the situation where there was significance, we would need to look at that. I think that would probably be when we'd want to have like an engineer involved and have an engineer weigh in if this is something that's structurally unstable and poses a health and safety concern. Then that's something that we would need confirmed by a heritage engineer. Health and safety overrides the Heritage Act. But if it's deemed to have components that are suitable, then we would move towards restoration for the resource. If we were told it had to come down, then that's when we would look at commemorative options.
Member Nixon?
Thank you, through you, the chair. So because this dwelling was added to the register because of the general character of Main Street West, I think my concern is, are there any protections in place of how to kind of see what would go in its place. Because I think what I'm thinking is if they're looking to demolish, what are they hoping to build in its place? And I know that Main Street West does have a lot of historical significance, architecturally, spatially, with the farmland and a lot of the history there. So I think, I'm wondering, is there any other protections that might be able to help us guide the narrative of that area going forward?
Bianca?
Thank you, through the chair. I think there's a lot of different opportunities. I know our OP speaks to the character of Main Street and the preservation of vegetation and things like that on the corridor. We did have a lot more control before with having a site plan so that we could actually, look into the detail of these buildings. That's something we often work towards for those properties. So we are looking at ways that we can still have that kind of impact on what comes, but there's different things we could look at, potentially cultural heritage landscapes and things like that, and the implementation of those. And I think that's something we can definitely look at. We're still navigating these changes, and it's definitely something we're taking into consideration, but I appreciate that comment.
Thank you, Bianca. Any more questions? Member Riley?
Thank you, through the chair. Bianca, with this one, I noted that it was originally a part of a larger parcel of land, and I'm just more curious if there's other properties in the vicinity of this one that now should also be pulled off the register, or likely to have the same sort of assessment based on, the location and their proximity to this property.
Bianca?
Thank you, through the chair. We assess each property individually, because there may be someone that's come later that has some type of associative value. But yeah, that's kind of where we're working towards with all of these research reports that we're doing. We're kind of cataloging families and seeing where their placement was. So now we know, like, the Lewis family was in this area, and we can see if there's any structures left from that time. There was none on this parcel, but definitely making a bank of all the different people and their history. But as for removal, I think our focus right now is on designation, and all of them are coming off in 2 years anyway. So I think our focus is on designation right now, but it's something we could look at, yeah.
Any more questions?
Chair, if I can make a comment, please.
Sure. Councillor DeFlavio?
Thank you, through you. So in my opinion, this is exactly the purpose of the Heritage Register. It's looking at properties that may be of heritage value that we haven't had a chance to explore further, but we identify, we recognize may be of value. This is an example of how it works, in my opinion. There are times where we might look at a property like this and say this needs to be designated and it needs to be preserved. And this is a case where we're looking at a property responsibly and saying this is not of heritage value. Look at what's happened to this home. It hasn't been preserved. It doesn't have the criteria necessary for designation, and therefore it will not be designated. So I think it's just further proof of what we've said at previous meetings, and that is leave it in the hands of the municipalities, leave it in the hands of staff to do their job and look at what, at the historical and heritage values of these homes, and then let us make that decision. And I think we're making the right decision tonight, and I think we've done that in the past as well. Nobody wants to stop people from developing, and nobody wants to stop people from making changes to their home, but we do want to make sure that we preserve Grimsby's heritage. And in this particular case, you've given us great evidence that it's not one that needs to be preserved. So I think this shows how it works, and it's further evidence of why the Heritage Register should be a tool that is maintained by municipalities.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a mover and seconder for the report? Okay. Moved by Member Evans, seconded by Member Riley. Resolved that report Heritage Property Recommendation Report 487 Main Street West demolition request be received, that the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee recommends that the dwelling at 487 Main Street West be permitted for demolition as the resource did not meet 2 or more of the Ontario Regulation 569/22 criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act, and that the property be removed from the Municipal Heritage Register under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act as a property that council believes to be of cultural heritage significance. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. And our next report on the agenda, 8.3, GH 23-05, Municipal Heritage Register Porch Demolition/Alteration Request, 18 Murray Street. Garrett?
Thank you, through you, the chair. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with background information regarding the proposed demolition and alteration of the porch at 18 Murray Street, which is listed on the Municipal Heritage Register. The property owners of 18 Murray Street have proposed to demolish the existing porch and rebuild a deeper, full-width compatible porch. Staff were able to identify the general age of the dwelling, which was likely constructed at the turn of the 20th century. It is important to note that the structure is experiencing significant rot within its structural system. On the screen, you will see the applicants have provided drawings for the committee's reference. The new porch will span the full width of the front facade, but will have the same depth as the existing porch. In summary, heritage planning staff find that the new porch design is compatible, distinguishable, and subordinate to the heritage resource. And note that this structural upgrade will further encourage the building's long-term retention, as the new porch will meet the needs of the property owners. Staff recommend that the demolition and alteration of the porch be recommended for approval, and that the existing porch be photo documented, and that copies of the photos be provided to the Grimsby Historical Society for their archives. Staff further recommend that viable material from the porch be salvaged and or offered to salvage companies to avoid high-end materials from going into the landfill. If there are any questions, please let staff know. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Any questions? Member Evans?
Thank you, through the chair. Considering there's significant rot, and rot is an invitation for termites and ants and everything, what's the process in terms of time for these homeowners to, they'd have to go to committee of the whole and then on to council? Or can this go on to council, be streamlined? I'm just thinking of timing for them for the fact of removing the porch and getting the material ordered. They can't order the material until they have approval, and they likely can't really schedule with a contractor until they have approval. And for me, with the consideration of rot in there, the sooner the better for them. I'm in support of the porch. I think, you know, these homes have to be allowed to be changed, and this is a respectful change to this house that they're doing. So I would support it.
Bianca?
Thank you, through the chair. I believe they are working towards a minor variance as well for the porch, so this is kind of happening concurrently. So I don't know if there's an absolute need to push it through, but if you want to recommend that, then we can prepare something to go right to council, or we could have the councillors here tonight ask for that item to be pulled, and they can suspend procedure orders to approve it that night. So we kind of have a couple options, but I don't know if there's like an immediate need to take it down.
I'm just thinking with, we're coming into spring, and I think that's when termites become much more, they're an issue all year long, but coming into the spring is even more of a significant issue for them. I think the second week of March is, I read it's a termite week or something like that, National Termite Awareness. So it is an issue when it comes to if there's any potential, you know, damage, and the damage transferring from the porch to the house. So that's my concern there, is how quickly rot can transfer. And then if there's ants or termites, you might be looking at what's on the outside, but you don't know what's going on in the inside. And that's so, if council, the members that are here want to consider it. If not, I'm just trying to think of a timely approach. We tell heritage homeowners there's no impact being on the heritage list. So I think if we can move certainly things like this along quickly, I think it's to the advantage as well for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. And just a comment, I'd be willing to do that at the meeting. Is there any other questions? Member Riley?
Through you, Chair. With this one, noting that there's a lot of rot that you're seeing right now, what's the process if more rot is found behind this? Do they have to stop, come back? If there's more demolition that has to happen, will they just continue forward, just kind of dealing with it as best they can? Just want to understand kind of what the impact is if they get the demolition portion complete and there's more than what the eye could see.
Bianca?
Thank you. So firstly, we would have to consider what they're doing to be demolition. Them actually removing the porch is considered demolition, and that's in consultation with our chief building official. So once he considers it demolition, that's when we know we need council approval. So because a structure is being demolished, the whole porch is being considered for demolition right now. But if when they take it down, they're seeing rot on the actual face of the building, I would consider that maintenance, so they can replace what they need to replace wood-wise. We would want them to replace in kind with in kind, and we would be happy to assist them through that.
Any other questions? Okay. So I need a mover and seconder to accept the report. Okay. Evans, seconded by Member Riley. Resolve that report GH 23-05, 18 Murray Street, Municipal Heritage Register porch demolition / alteration request dated March 14, 2023 be received, and that the demolition alteration request for the porch at 18 Murray Street be recommended for approval, and that the porch on 18 Murray Street be photo documented, and that copies of the photos be provided to the Grimsby Historic Society for their archives, and that viable material from the porch be salvaged and or offered to salvage companies to avoid high-quality materials going to the landfill. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Okay, our next report, 8-4 Designation Research Report, 38 Roberts Road. Joanna?
Thank you, through you, the chair. Staff would like to note to the committee that all property owners have been given notice of the proposed designation of their properties. Staff are working collectively with property owners to address any questions or concerns they may have. Staff recommend that the property at 38 Robert Road be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 5 out of 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 56922. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because the structure at 38 Roberts Road is a 2-story house built in the Loyalist Georgian style. Some of the key physical attributes include the mixture of local stone for the masonry, gable roof and window placement. The Georgian style was popular among the United Emperor Loyalist settlers who wanted to construct homes that incorporated a European influence from the architecture of their native countries. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative values because the house at 38 Roberts Road has direct associations with the Pettit family. Andrew Pettit was one of the first United Empire Loyalists who settled in Grimsby in 1797. Andrew Pettit was the driving force behind the founding of the first Anglican church in Grimsby. When the town had raised enough money to build a stone church, they named it after Andrew, showing the impact he had within the community. Andrew's oldest son, Jonathan, built the tenant house to accompany the main house known as the Evergreens at 42 Roberts Road. The property meets the criteria for contextual value because 38 Roberts Road maintains a rural atmosphere that strongly represents the former viewscapes of the area. 38 Roberts gives an example of what housing would look like for tenant farmers of prosperous families. To have a surviving example of both the the tenant house and the main house in situ provides an important image into the character of Roberts Road and how a well-established family like the Pettits supported the growth of the town around them. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest and significant findings, staff recommends that the property at 38 Roberts Road be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joanna. Any questions? Member Evans?
So if I could know maybe what homeowners were on board with designation, and on 38 Roberts, it looks like the windows have already been replaced and everything, like the designation speaks specifically to certain things, and the one thing, this one and the next one are two that, to me, they speak to why we have the Heritage Act. It is to tell the story of our country, and for me, mass designation isn't the reason for the Heritage Act and why it was created. But these two properties, they do speak to some of the first families of this community and that. But, I've discussed with you, the one concern I always have is the trading in kind of if they have to replace their windows and everything, the cost associated with that. So I would like to know, maybe what the homeowners have done a phenomenal job of bringing this house forward in time, and it's been done so respectfully and everything. So if they've updated all their windows and you're designated the windows, what does that speak to in terms of them going to ever replace them again? Is it just with what's already there, or are they held to any certain point in time previous to what the windows are that exist now?
Bianca?
Thank you. Through the chair. So firstly, all property owners have been notified. We shared a letter with them. We always notify them a month in advance with a copy of the report. And we've, along the way, met with many property owners and talked through this process, but a lot of them are understanding the fact that through Bill 23, all of our heritage buildings will lose any protection. So if a demolition permit came in for one of these houses, our hands would be tied and we'd have to issue it. So they're understanding where we're coming from. So it's not that mass designation is, how I would label it. I think it's just we have our foundational buildings and we need to give them protection. Otherwise, if a demolition permit comes in, we can do nothing. So it's very important we give them that protection. So I wanted to note that, and we are being very respectful with notification and making time for property owners. And the feedback I'm getting from most of them is they understand why we're coming to them, and they know they have a very important building. And these are scoring very high on the criteria, so they're very obvious, they very obviously merit the protection. So I just wanted to note that. But as for the windows, so the designation applies to the building at the time of designation, so we wouldn't make them go back and put wood windows in. Because they've been replaced, we would probably just say window openings within the designation bylaw, and we wouldn't speak to the vinyl windows at all. Best practice is replace in kind with in kind. So if they take out a vinyl window, they can put in a vinyl window. That's typically how it works. But we would help them manage change on those sites. And I think from a heritage preservation standpoint, we've come a long way. And speaking with the property owners and trying to explain to them, it's not us trying to control what you're doing. It's just if you're putting an addition on, we want to make sure those connection details work together. We want to make sure that the historic material works well with the modern material. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking at colors. We're looking at those really technical components to make sure your building, isn't going to suffer from that addition being added. And it's those technical elements that we're really looking at. So we've been working with the property owners and making sure they feel comfortable with what those designation bylaws down the road will look like. So there'll still be a lot of time for conversation with the homeowners. They haven't received any formal notification yet. This has all been just letting them know it's coming, essentially. Yeah.
So this particular homeowner, they've done, the way they've brought it forward, they've also put their stamp on the house, which I think is important for heritage homeowners to be able to do, and us to never be in a position where we're so strict about colors and everything else, that we allow homeowners, to bring, they put their personality on. Their homes, and to never put them in where they're stuck to certain colors or anything like that. And this home, I think, is one of those great examples of how they've so respectfully, all the changes they've made to it, it's been done so well. But I am still concerned, are they on board with designation?
Through the chair. So we have notified them. We gave them a designation, like draft report a month ago with a letter and everything. We have not heard from this particular owner just yet, but there's still lots of time in the process, and they still get a formal notification that they have to sign for. So they'll be well aware that this is happening, and we have made ourselves available to property owners to meet and discuss and make sure they're feeling comfortable. And we agree with the homeowners putting their layer on these buildings, and I think Murray Street is a great example where if we allow our heritage homeowners to customize these properties to make them work for them, it just helps to encourage the retention of those resources as time continues. So I think as a committee and even as like a heritage industry, we're moving forward to just see that we have to make sure that these buildings can adapt. So I think that's a really good point to bring to the homeowners, but we are here if they have concerns, we're here to answer those for them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Can I have a mover and seconder for the designation report? Moved by Nixon. A seconder? O'Reilly. Resolve the 38 Roberts Road be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Okay, and next on the agenda, we have Designation Research Report 42 Roberts Road. Joanna?
Thank you, through you, the chair. Staff recommend that the property at 42 Roberts Road be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 5 out of 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 56922. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because 42 Roberts Road is a 2-story stone house built in the Loyalist Georgian style. The house is built on the foundation of an earlier log cabin. The Georgian style was popular among the United Emperor Loyalist settlers who wanted to construct homes that incorporated a European influence from the architecture of their native countries. The quatrefoil brackets are an unusual feature and are a detail not commonly found within Grimsby. The design can be attributed to medieval influences in Gothic designs. The multiple additions on the house are important in illustrating the story of how the building has evolved for the occupants over time. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative values because in 1820, Jonathan Pettit, Andrew's oldest son, built a stone house which he named the Evergreens. The house and farm stayed within the family until 1921. The Pettit family, through generations, were incredibly important to the farming and community of Grimsby. The land and house of 42 Roberts Road are intact representations of this history. The Pettit farm transitioned from orchards to livestock farming and were recognized for their very specialized farming knowledge that they brought with them from New Jersey. The Pettits further transitioned to berry farming once they realized the unique climate of Niagara could sustain the specific type of crop, creating a more profitable tender fruit farm. The property meets the criteria for contextual values because 42 Roberts Road maintains a deep setback and rural atmosphere that strongly represents the former viewscape of the area. Prior to the construction of the surrounding subdivisions, the sight lines to the front facade of the house from Evergreens Drive are important in maintaining the relationship to the house and its orientation in the surrounding neighborhood. Jonathan created a steady income source through farming the land. 42 Roberts Road is the oldest surviving structure in the immediate area and has significant ties to the Pettits and their surrounding estates. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff have recommended that the property of 42 Roberts Road be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joanna. Any questions? Member Evans?
For clarification, I was a no on the last one. I'm against forced designation, so I just didn't know if that was noted. I support, once again, this one, if there's proper protection in place for homeowners, and I'm going to speak to that later on. I would agree if there's proper protection in place for the homeowners on the previous one to this one, but at this time, I don't agree with the designation on the last one or this one. Thank you.
Any other questions? Member Riley?
Through you, the chair. Can I just clarify, is this homeowner in agreement with this, or are they resistant to this? Sorry, I didn't know if that was a question you'd asked or if you knew that answer.
Bianca?
This homeowner in particular called me yesterday. They received the letter that we sent to them a month ago, and they had a lot of questions about it, but they also, again, understood how important this site is, and they want to meet with staff, and they want to talk about it, and they want to work together. They want to get to a place where they feel comfortable with the designation bylaw for the site, so, yeah, thanks.
Member Riley?
Through you, the chair. Thanks, Bianca. Would it make sense then maybe to defer this to the next meeting, just giving them a little more time to talk about it with you and see how they are with the process?
In my professional opinion, I think with Bill 23, we need to keep moving forward with protecting these resources because we only have 2 years to assess them. And that's my professional opinion of that, but I'll leave that with you.
Member Evans?
I think in terms of community and the fact that so many of these homeowners have shown such great respect to remaining on the heritage list, they haven't challenged it, they've remained on it. I always think it's worth a conversation first. And I think it's worth having the conversation with them so that you can hear maybe what their concerns are. And I do believe that if there were certain protective measures in place for the homeowner, you likely would attract more homeowners to designation. So I would definitely like to see the support of maybe a meeting with the homeowners that they can speak to you without prejudice and ask their questions instead of us just going through. You know, not every homeowner is looking to demolish their home. The average home cost in Grimsby is close to $1 million. So not everyone's going to look to demolishing their home and rebuilding it. I think, and I'm a heritage homeowner, I think answering the questions and them having a comfort level with it and knowing what implications, if any, there might be for them, speaking to, you know, what they might want to do if there's an addition or anything, how it might impact them. I always think that would be a better route to go than just forcing designation on them and forcing anyone to go out to OLT and either side spending unnecessary money to fight something. I think a proactive of working with the homeowner instead of just designating them and then them going to the OLT and fighting it. Because if they do, they could be lost from the registry for, I think it's 5 years or something anyways. And we're going to spend the money in fighting something. I'd sooner have the conversation with them. So thank you.
Thank you. Bianca?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to note they would be in an active NOID, so they could, it wouldn't be removed from the register if it was appealed. I just wanted to note that it would be protected once it's in that notice of intention to designate. And I absolutely hear what you're saying, but I think the thing is, these processes are in place that allows those conversations to happen. This is the first time we're consulting with the Heritage Committee. This still has to go to Committee of the Whole, still has to go to Council. Then the homeowner is officially notified. They have 30 days again to meet with staff. Then we can take the decision from the homeowners to Council for their consideration. And then there's the passing of the bylaw, an additional 30 days for an appeal. So there is lots of time for consultation with the homeowners. I think we just have to think of the greater good of the community, and these buildings be maintained long-term. That's, our role is to preserve those heritage resources in the community. So I just encourage you, I understand all of these components, and I think in the ideal situation, we were working towards owner concurrence for designations, but with these significant impacts of Bill 23, we're not alone. We're not the only community doing this. This is how Ontario is dealing with this. So it's happening amongst all communities. And all we can do is take it case by case and work with each homeowner and make the time for them to be heard. But I do encourage you to remember that we do have 2 years to protect these buildings. And I do have some concern if we continue to defer. A lot of resources are going into preparing these reports, and if in order to keep moving forward, we need to, deal with the files as they come, and then, next month we have more coming, so we have to continue to move forward if we want to protect the community, the actual built heritage. So I just wanted to note that, but I do think that the homeowners are very important in this process, and there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Thank you. Mayor Jordan.
Thank you through the chair to Bianca and the Heritage staff. I just commend you for all the work you are doing, and I do see the time, and I really feel it's imperative that we move forward as quickly as we can, and obviously keeping the conversation open between the homeowners and staff, and working with them, but. We're against a time crunch, and we need to move forward. Deferring on things is just not the way to go, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I had a quick comment.
Okay, Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Yeah, this is precisely the type of property that we is put at risk by Bill 23, in my opinion. It's a large property with a home that is a small footprint relative to the size of the property in a developed neighborhood. So it's the kind of house that's at risk. And while I agree with Member Evans that we want owner concurrence, in this particular case, and in all of these cases, the province has forced our hand, and we traditionally have not done it this way. But I agree that with Bianca and with Mayor Jordan that we do need to keep moving forward, and we've got to make sure that and you're doing a great job of prioritizing, I think, the ones that are important. When I look at this house, I see a house that could be torn down to put in, probably 15 or 20 units on that property if it were torn down. So we need to move forward on properties like this and designate them as quickly as possible to make sure that that doesn't happen. And, I would never, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, unless there was a chance of demolition, I wouldn't have even had a discussion about this. Honestly, I would have said, let's try to get the owners on side. But I think we're past that point, and I think that the province has made it so that we can't do that anymore. We need to make our choices and make our decisions based on what we know about the properties. And these two properties are two perfect examples of properties that probably should have been designated years ago, but we put it off and put it off and put it off. And I'm glad that we're doing it today, or we'll be doing it when council looks at it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Evans?
So I'd just like to know, as someone that was challenged with insurance, what's the process going to be for these homeowners if they're designated and their insurance agent? I just had a conversation 2 weeks ago with my insurance agent, and the first thing she went to was about whether I was on the registry and then whether I was designated. And I assured her I wasn't designated, I'm just on the registry. It's still an issue. And the one thing, the conversation comes up with is that insurance companies don't understand heritage. She assured me they do understand heritage. The town's insurance, I think, doubled in the last 2 years. Heritage homeowners are, unfortunately, and it's not justified. I have no knob and tube. My home's been fully updated. But I had my insurance company walk away from me, and I don't want that to happen to another homeowner. So that's why I take the stand that I do, is that we've had this conversation about designation, and it's been going on so much in the last 4 years, and yet I haven't seen the processes being put into place in terms of insurance and all the other things that need to happen. And Bianca, I appreciate your speaking to your credentials, and that's what you need to speak to. So I appreciate that. And I believe we all want the same thing. It's just the process of how we're going about it. So that's why I challenge it, is I'm a homeowner. I'm not going to do to someone that I'm not prepared to do to myself. And I will take that stand that I would like to see more policy in place in terms of protecting the homeowner and that. So it's why I don't support just designating them without consulting with them. So thank you.
Bianca?
So just to the insurance piece, we have created a document in the town that we've been using. We have some heritage specialized insurances that we've been sharing with homeowners, and we've been asking for them to send back the document with feedback. So we've been providing that to our homeowners. We've also been putting together documents. Our heritage planner, Garrett, has been working with providing a document that speaks to the underwriters and ways to get the best rates and things like that from his personal experience owning a heritage property. So we are working on that, and because it is something that's, this Bill 23 is affecting all people across Ontario, we have a very close group of colleagues that are working close together to try and find solutions. And I know there's companies that are working towards being heritage-focused insurance companies. So things are happening, but right now in the town, we do have a document we've been using, and we're hearing people are having no problem get it. We have heard a few people that are struggling, but we have used this document. So we don't want the homeowners to feel burdened by this. We're here to support you. We've been working to implement programs where staff will come out and assess resources. We've been building a roster of heritage professionals that come highly regarded in the field. And so we're doing everything we can to support our homeowners, but while preserving this important layer in our community, because once they're gone, they're gone. So we have to put some level of protection in place. So that's just my comments on insurance, but thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Okay. So can I have a mover and a seconder to accept the report? Do we have a mover? Okay. Moved by Member Nixon, seconded by Member Riley. Resolved that 42 Roberts Road be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Okay, and our next report is 8.6 on the agenda, Designation Research Report, 122 Main Street East. Garrett?
Thank you, through the chair. Staff recommend that the property at 122 Main Street East be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 6 out of the 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 56922. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because the dwelling, built in 1897 at 122 Main Street East, was constructed with clay bricks and sits on a cut stone foundation. The window openings feature segmental arches with header brick detailing above the voussoirs. The original window openings are completed with cut stone sills, and some of the original wooden windows still remain. The front facade of this structure is dressed with a wraparound porch, decorative fretwork, and a unique two-story porch over the original front entryway. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the dwelling at 122 Main Street East provides insight into the successful tender fruit farming industry that put the town of Grimsby on the map. The development of the farmhouse estates along Main Street is also directly linked to the introduction of the HG&B electric railway that provided an opportunity for produce to be shipped further and faster than ever. The property meets the criteria for contextual value because the dwelling at 122 Main Street East is significant in supporting the character of Main Street's council-identified cultural heritage landscape. The scale, materials, and setback of the historic structure contribute to the style of farmhouses that were historically found along this Main Street corridor. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff have recommended that the property at 122 Main Street East be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Any questions? Okay, no questions. Can I have a mover and seconder for the report? Seconder? Okay, Mayor Jordan. Resolved that 122 Main Street East be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And on to our next report, 8.7, Designation Research Report 50 to 52, Park Road North. Garrett?
Thank you, through you, the chair. I will be presenting the Park Road North designations together, but we will need to pass two resolutions as the three subject buildings are on two properties. Staff recommend that the properties at 50 to 52 and 54 Park Road North be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The property at 50 to 52 Park Road North contains the three-story shoe factory, which met 9 out of the 9 prescribed criteria, and the associated craftsman house on the property meets 5 of the prescribed criteria. The property at 54 Park Road North contains the small 1.5-story Victory House, which is attached to the shoe factory and meets 4 of the prescribed criteria. The shoe factory meets the criteria for design and physical value because the industrial streamlined modern building is unique in its style because of its timber post and beam construction system with wooden exterior frame. The building has details such as being a 3-story structure, original iron entrance gates to the factory and property with brick columns, the 3 arched carriage style loading doors on the main floor with strap hinges, which are located on the oldest section of the building. The craftsman house on the property meets the criteria for design and physical value because the large brick house is representative of the craftsman style typical to Ontario in the 1920s. Key aspects of this style include symmetry, the double flue chimney with decorative stone details, smooth red brick with lime mortar, gable roof with front-facing gable dormer, deep eaves and soffits, and stone-cut lintels and stone-cut sills. The Victory House meets the criteria for design and physical value because this style of building is known as a Victory Home, which comes from the completion of the World Wars and the need for functional, affordable homes to house veterans returning to Canada. The simple construction methods, usable attic space, and small floor plan make this style of housing popular. The house has notable corner windows that mimic the design on the attached shoe factory. The shoe factory meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the industrial, streamlined, modern factory has relationships with important names from the Grimsby community. The property was home to the Gadsby Shoe Factory, which was the creator of various patents and innovations in the shoemaking world. It is one of the few remaining historic industrial sites in Grimsby. The Craftsman House meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the large house on the Gadsby property has ties to notable names within the community. The property was originally owned by fruit farmer, businessman, and councillor James Marlowe, who initiated the construction of the surrounding subdivision. The Gadsby family also lived in the structure while operating the adjacent shoe factory and business, E.J. Gadsby and Sons. The Victory House meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the Gadsby Shoe Factory is located on the property, and it was a place of innovation and production of shoes for Grimsby and all of Canada during the years of operation. There is also a physical connection between the factory and the small house, a wooden frame addition that extends between the two structures. The shoe factory meets the criteria for contextual value because the property is considered a landmark when driving down the highway and service road. This property would have been a landmark along the original Park Road prior to the construction of the QEW. Further newspaper articles speak to the design of the factory, and there was a significant emphasis put on the design and the use of shiny materials at the time of construction. The Craftsman House meets the criteria for contextual value because the large house on the Gadsby property is important in defining the relationship between Grimsby Beach, Grimsby Town, the QEW, and Park Road. When the factory was built, Park Road went all the way to the water. Today it is now separated by the highway. The Victory House meets the criteria for contextual value because the property is physically, functionally, visually, and historically linked to its surroundings. It is important in the relationship between Grimsby Beach, Grimsby Town, the QEW, and the former nearby Grand Trunk Railway Station that was at Grimsby Beach. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage or value or interest, staff recommend that the properties at 50 to 52 and 54 Park Road North be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. If you have any questions, please let staff know. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Any questions? Member Evans?
So I think this property, I'm not sure, I think it's been up for sale for quite a while, and I believe it was just purchased in the fall. I don't need to know if the conversation or that, but if the purchaser came forward, I would think this property is likely something that somebody has an idea of what they want to do with it when they're purchasing it. And I'm not thinking it's necessarily to tear everything down. I'm thinking they have in mind something they'd like to do. And if that's the case, will designation interfere with them going forward, maybe with the reason why they bought the property?
Bianca?
Thank you, through the chair. So the property owners do know about this. It was added to the register with the previous property owner, who was the Gadsby family. They knew about it going into the sale. When we were going through that process, we were very open with them that this is a very culturally significant site, and we had intention of protecting it long-term. And further to that, as I noted earlier, heritage preservation has come a long way in the field, and we know adaptive reuse of this site is the right move for the site. It makes sure that it's retained long-term, but by having this protection on the site, we can guide what that looks like, and we can ensure character-defining elements are incorporated into that redesign. But adaptive reuse of the site is the appropriate path forward, and we want to make sure it's relevant, because then we know it's going to stay in our landscape for a long time.
Member Nixon?
Thank you, through you, the chair. So first, I just wanted to commend you on the research. I found this story so fascinating. And as someone who's lived here my entire life and have driven by that building a million times, I had no idea. So first, I just wanted to say, really well done on the research. It was a fascinating story. And I think this is a really good example, again, of something that we kind of got lost in the landscape, and now we can bring the story to life. And like you mentioned, if adaptive reuse is a possibility, like knowing these stories that are attached to it can really kind of guide an interesting way to adapt and reuse the property. So I'm really excited about this. And I also think this research could lend well to other historic interpretation going forward as well, in so many different ways. So I just wanted to note the exciting opportunity that this lends, and I'm excited to see what happens. So thank you so much for doing that work.
Any other questions? Okay.
I have a quick one.
Okay, Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I love the report as well. As far as the condition of the building is concerned, do we know what the condition of the factory is, and if it's something that's able to be preserved and restored? Because it looks superficially like it's in, it's fairly run down. So I just don't want to put people in a position where they're forced to preserve a building that can't be preserved. If staff is satisfied that, the foundation is still good, and all I've seen is the images that were provided and the ones that were in the listing from the previous sale. So
Through the chair, so myself, Garrett, we've both been in the factory a few times, so we've had a chance to look around, and in consultation with the property owners, I know they did have a structural assessment completed for the site, and they said it was actually in fantastic condition considering its age. So I really do hope to see this adaptively reused, and I think there's a lot of potential on the site.
yeah, I agree. It would be a neat place for a distillery or a brewery or something like that, but who knows, maybe they've got a really neat idea for it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Okay, so this one is done in two parts. The first one will be 50 to 52 Park Road North. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Mover, Nixon. And seconder. Resolved that 50 to 52 Park Road North be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And I need a mover and seconder for the second part for 54 Park Road North. Riley. Resolved that 54 Park Road North be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. And next on the agenda, we have new business. Is there anybody who has new business to share? Member Evans?
Thank you, Councillor Kristanji. So I have a couple of things that I would like to speak to. One is I'm going to be putting a letter forward to councillors and the mayor, and I'm going to ask that when they go to AMO, that we have a delegation there that can speak to the Minister of Culture and Tourism of possibly getting more money towards heritage and more support. Out of the G7 countries, we are the only one that does not receive federal support for our homeowners, and some tax incentives and that. And I'd also like to propose that we have a working group, even if it is an extra meeting. We did some working groups, and I think we accomplished quite a bit in there, but it also allowed to have some open conversations. And I think it's imperative that we have these discussions on we can be doing for homeowners, and coming together with some ideas and everything so that we can put something forward. I also would like to speak to, we talked in our working group about doing a garden where we, in one of the parks, and I did speak briefly to Sarah Sweeney about it, where we could put in some plants, native plants to this area and everything, and have a real community effort put in. And coming up, that it is coming up to spring, I think it's time that we try to do this if we can for this year. I put forward a couple ideas to her, and that, but I think the working groups would allow us a bit of extra time behind the scenes to do this, and certainly get some benefit in place for homeowners. Like anything, you know, I think just to give them the support, and I think that us pursuing whatever funds we can for heritage homeowners would be imperative at this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Evans. Anyone else with new business?
If I could, Chair, through you, just to support Member Evans's what she had to say there. I think that council and, well, staff will, we've talked about it repeatedly, and I think this council is one that is a strong supporter of heritage. And I think the idea that we need to start putting our money where our mouth is, and what that looks like as far as heritage properties is concerned, is an important one. So I would recommend, you know, maybe perhaps at a future meeting, we bring forward a resolution that, and staff is busy now because we have all this Bill 23 stuff to deal with, and I know that, Bianca, you're probably already looking at it, but I do want to see, you know, a list of what we can do of incentives. We've done it in the past, but something more than just, you know, facade improvement grants and things like that, something that actually offers relief to property owners who have heritage homes. We know that there are costs associated with owning a heritage home, and we want to preserve them. And so if that's something that we want to continue to do and we want to continue to promote, then we do need to understand that there's a financial impact. And frankly, in the past, we've been told that whatever we do as a town of Grimsby is generally matched by the region and by the province as far as tax incentives are concerned. So you get a lot of bang for your buck when you do it through taxes. So it's something I'd like to look at, and so here to that idea, Member Evans.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Yeah, we could. Member Evans, did you want to pass a resolution to create the working groups?
That would be great if we could. Thank you.
So the resolution is going to be resolved that we establish working groups to support our heritage homeowners. So I'll need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Member Evans. Do I have a seconder? Member Nixon. Okay, resolved, we establish working groups to support our heritage homeowners. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried. Thank you. So is there any other new business? Okay, and with that, the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.